Close your eyes and drift backward, far, far beyond kings and pyramids, beyond dinosaurs, beyond even the first forests. Keep going until time itself feels like it's dissolving. You land nearly 4.5 billion years ago, on a world that is young, raw, and, let's be honest, an absolute disaster zone. The Earth, then, is not the blue and green comfort you know. It is a glowing cauldron, stitched together from cosmic debris left over from the birth of the sun. Giant asteroids pummel the surface like drunken gods throwing tantrums. Each impact reshapes the crust, vaporizes oceans before they have a chance to form, and leaves scars that glow with molten rock. Imagine trying to build a sandcastle while someone repeatedly drops boulders on it. That's early Earth in a nutshell. The air? Not breathable, not even close. Instead of oxygen, the skies are choked with carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, sulfur. Clouds are thick with volcanic ash. Lightning flashes constantly, and acid rain lashes against bare rock. You'd need more than a gas mask to survive. You'd need a miracle. The world is beautiful in its own way, though. Fiery red horizons, skies painted in violent purples and deep copper, seas of lava glowing like veins of light. It's a planet caught between being born and being broken. Now, let yourself hover above the chaos, as if you were watching from a safe balcony in space. You see Earth spinning fast, glowing faintly against the blackness. From afar, it almost looks alive already, like a beating ember. Up close, however, it's hard to believe anything living could ever emerge here. And yet, the stage is being set. Somewhere deep inside this turmoil, the seeds of oceans are gathering. Asteroids carry water locked in minerals. Volcanoes belch steam that condenses, drop by drop, to coat the cooling crust. Over millions of years, those droplets collect into puddles, then lakes, then basins so vast they stretch across continents. Imagine listening to rain fall for thousands of centuries straight, the slow percussion of water carving a planet. Eventually, rivers flow, seas swell, and Earth exhales. The fire gives way to water. Picture it. Waves rolling across the first true oceans, steam rising as heat still leaks from the crust. They are dark, heavy with dissolved minerals, greenish and murky under a dim young sun. But they are oceans nonetheless, the first great cradle where life's story will begin. The Earth, once a scorched wasteland, now wears shimmering blue. You might be tempted to cheer. Finally, the world is ready for us. But hold that thought. At this point, Earth is only barely habitable. These oceans are chemical soups. No fish, no plants, not even algae yet. Just a swirling mix of elements and molecules bumping into each other. Life hasn't arrived, but the recipe is in place. Scientists still debate how exactly that leap was made, from chemistry to biology, from lifeless water to living cell. Was it sparked by lightning striking shallow ponds, assembling molecules into something that could copy itself? Or did it happen at deep-sea hydrothermal vents, where heat and minerals created natural laboratories? Perhaps comets brought the first organic seeds. No one knows for sure. What we do know is this. In the quiet shadows of these early oceans, something extraordinary stirred. For now, imagine drifting just above the waves, listening. The world is quieter than it will ever be again. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves, only the hiss of steam, the bubbling of vents, the rumble of volcanoes far away. If silence has a birthplace, it is here. And as you float, you realize, this desolate peace is not empty. It is potential. The planet is waiting, breathing, simmering, holding its breath for the first flicker of life. Close your eyes a little tighter. Can you feel it? The tension between nothing and everything? That's where you are, suspended at the edge of creation. Soon, the first spark will ignite. But for this moment, let yourself drift in the strange, molten beauty of Earth becoming ocean. Ocean becoming possibility. The fire has given way to water. The story has begun. You drift further into the scene, the sound of those ancient waves pressing against your ears, like the hum of an old refrigerator you forgot to unplug. The shallows are calling you now, drawing you down to the places where sunlight can still penetrate, scattering ribbons of gold through the swirling water. Here, in these warm, shallow seas, the story of life begins to stir in earnest. You imagine your toes sinking into silt that has never felt the print of any foot. Instead of seashells, you find microbial mats spread across the seabed, slimy sheets of life carpeting the sand like bizarre alien rugs. If you touch them, though I wouldn't recommend it, you'd feel something halfway between pudding skin and wet paper towels. These mats are built by cyanobacteria, those stubborn little architects of oxygen who have been at this business for billions of years already. They're the quiet workers, laying the foundation while the world above rages with storms. The seas at this point are oddly alive, yet still waiting for the big curtain to rise. Picture a city in the morning before rush hour. The baker has started his ovens. A few streetlights still blink, and delivery trucks rattle down the alleyways. That's where you are. The prelude to chaos, the warm-up act before the Cambrian band starts smashing guitars. The light flickers, and you notice plankton drifting lazily. Not the kind of plankton you'd find in a modern ocean documentary, with their neat spirals and elegant filaments. No, these are primitive, rough sketches of the idea of plankton, life doodling on a watery notepad, testing out shapes and sizes. Some are almost invisible, ghostly motes of possibility. Others form chains, clumping together like kids huddled in a playground. And then, as you float there in imagination, you feel something you don't quite expect. The faintest twitch of complexity. It comes in the form of eukaryotes, cells with real inner parts, nuclei, organelles, the kind of cells that make up everything you know, including you. They're bobbing here, hidden among the mats and the murk, preparing to revolutionize the oceans in ways that make bacteria look like outdated flip phones. The shallows themselves are shaping this destiny. They are the stage, shallow enough for sunlight to power photosynthesis, calm enough for fragile bodies to avoid being shredded by deep ocean pressure. Warm, mineral-rich currents drift in from volcanic vents, carrying chemical recipes like invitations to an enormous potluck dinner. You can almost hear the water fizz with potential, as if the entire ocean is waiting for someone to press start. Here's a fun fact most people don't know. Some of the earliest trace fossils, tiny tunnels and scratches etched into ancient seabeds, may come from worms wriggling through these very shallow sediments. Nothing glamorous, just little creatures nosing around for food. Yet, those scratches are the first whispers of animal behavior, the original graffiti on the walls of Earth's history. Historians still debate whether these traces belong to actual animals or just weird microbial tricks. But either way, it's the equivalent of someone knocking on the door before barging in. You breathe in, or try to, and you notice the air above these seas is still not the kind of air you'd enjoy on a picnic. The oxygen is rising, yes, thanks to those tireless bacteria, but the balance is fragile. Too much oxygen at once could have poisoned the world with fire. Too little, and nothing more complex could survive. It's as if the Earth itself is fumbling with a thermostat, trying to find the right temperature for company. The ocean floor glimmers with minerals, iron oxide staining the water rusty red, sulfur bubbling here and there. At times, it smells like rotten eggs, the scent of hydrogen sulfide seeping up from deeper pockets. Not exactly beach resort vibes, unless your idea of a getaway is hot springs laced with toxic gas. Yet, for life, this mix of chemicals is both hazard and opportunity. It forces adaptations, tests resilience, pushes tiny cells into creative new forms. You notice the silence, not the silence of a peaceful lake, but a hollow quiet, as though the soundtrack hasn't been recorded yet. No fish splashing, no gulls wheeling overhead. only the thrum of tides and the occasional crackle of underwater gas escaping. Your imagination supplies a kind of hush, a waiting, and then, in this hush, the first stirrings of genuine ecosystems begin. Think of it like the pilot episode of a long-running series. The cast isn't complete, the sets are simple, but the energy is there. Cyanobacteria lay the groundwork. Algae join the chorus. Protozoa wander like curious toddlers. Small predators, barely more than single-celled hunters, chase after prey. It's microscopic drama, unfolding in every droplet. You lean closer, and suddenly the ocean is less empty, more alive than you realized. You can almost feel your mind shrink down, shrinking and shrinking until you're standing on one of those microbial mats, staring at a single-celled hunter through eyes it doesn't even know exist. It lunges forward, engulfs its prey, and somewhere in that tiny act is the DNA blueprint that will eventually give rise to predators the size of buses. There's something almost comical about it. Here you are, worrying about what to eat tomorrow, while in the shallow seas 500 million years ago, the question is literally how to invent eating in the first place. The rules of the game are being written on the fly, and life is still debating whether chewing is a good idea. The sun lowers behind an ancient horizon. The light filters red through a haze of volcanic dust. You stand knee-deep in shallow water that glows with life, invisible to your eyes, but undeniable in its presence. If you squint, you can almost sense the choreography. Molecules aligning, cells clustering, behaviors emerging. The air hums with anticipation. Historians and paleontologists often argue about when exactly the Cambrian Explosion began. Was it sudden, a burst of innovation like fireworks? Or was it gradual, a long, slow burn that only looks explosive when compressed into geological time? They debate, they publish, they wrangle over fossils that could fit either story. But for you, drifting in these shallows, the distinction doesn't matter. What matters is that you can feel the rising energy, like the intake of breath before a laugh. The tide pulls back, revealing ripples in the sand. You trace them with your eyes, noticing the faint impressions left behind by microbial mats. The patterns are delicate, fragile, but also stubbornly enduring. You imagine them fossilized, hardened into stone, surviving eons until some future geologist scrapes away dust and finds them again. Life leaves its autograph everywhere, even when it barely knows how to write. You lie back in your imagination, floating on the surface as twilight spreads across the sky. The stars above are unfamiliar, scattered across a Milky Way, unrecognizable to modern eyes. They shine nonetheless, steady and cold, over a world that is just beginning to hum with possibility. And as the water rocks you gently, you sense that something is coming, an acceleration, a transformation, the first real drumbeat of the great evolutionary symphony. The shallow seas are no longer empty. They are rehearsal halls, tuning up for the concert of life. You smile, even as your eyelids grow heavy. Somewhere down there, unseen, the actors are taking their marks. The curtain is about to rise. The tide swells around your ankles, warmer now, as if the ocean itself has drawn in a deeper breath. You sense the atmosphere above you, shifting ever so slightly. An invisible gamble playing out between oxygen and all the other gases that once ruled the sky. This is the oxygen gamble, and you, standing at the edge of those shallow seas, can almost hear the dice rolling. At first, the change is subtle. The cyanobacteria have been at their long, thankless work for ages, puffing out oxygen as casually as a smoker exhaling on a city sidewalk. To them, it's waste, a byproduct they didn't care about, the equivalent of throwing banana peels out a car window. But that trash is becoming treasure, piling up in the atmosphere molecule by molecule, breath by breath, until the world itself starts to transform. You try to inhale, and though your imagination lets you, you know the truth. The air of this age would still feel thin, acrid, dangerous. Too much methane and carbon dioxide still linger, and pockets of poisonous gases like hydrogen sulfide seep up from the ocean floor. If you were really here, you'd cough, gag, and drop like a sack of laundry. Yet the oxygen is rising, like a candle slowly brightening a darkened room. The oceans reflect this gamble most clearly. Iron that once roamed free in the water now bonds with oxygen, sinking as rust-colored sediments onto the sea floor. The sea itself turns streaky, painted with rusty swirls like some oversized latte gone wrong. If you scoop a handful, your palm would stain reddish-brown, as if the ocean had tried finger painting. These iron deposits, banded iron formations as geologists call them, are Earth's first great canvas, recording the chemical tug-of-war in broad, layered strokes. And here's a strange detail you may not know. Too much oxygen at once could have wiped the slate clean. Early oxygen levels, if they spiked too high, might have sparked wildfires, stripping away ecosystems before they even took root. Fire and suffocation were both on the table. The Earth, it seems, was improvising, like a chef tossing random spices into a pot, hoping the soup wouldn't explode. You shift your gaze across the horizon, where volcanic mountains hiss smoke into the sky. Each eruption belches carbon dioxide, fighting against the oxygen rise, trying to tip the balance back. The scene feels like a cosmic arm wrestle, volcanoes pushing down, bacteria pushing up, and the atmosphere straining in the middle. The gamble doesn't just shape the air, it sculpts the future of life. With more oxygen, organisms can finally afford higher metabolisms. They can move faster, grow bigger, build sturdier bodies. Energy is currency, and oxygen is the mint. Without it, the Cambrian stage would have remained empty. With it, the orchestra can finally warm up. You lean forward, peering into the shallows, and spot tiny threads of multicellular life wriggling in the mats. They're simple, fragile, more like decorative noodles than real animals. But they're proof that complexity has paid its ante in this gamble. Each cell breathes a little easier now, using oxygen to power more ambitious experiments. And one of those experiments, though no one realizes it yet, will become you. The water laps against your knees. It's salty, yes, but in a different way than modern seas. Ancient oceans were thick with dissolved minerals, calcium, magnesium, iron, all swirling together in chemical soup. Imagine dipping your hand into a pot of miso broth, left simmering for several million years. That's what early life had to deal with. An environment at once nourishing and hazardous, generous and cruel. And while you float here, you notice something curious. The shallow seabeds start to ripple not just with waves, but with burrows. Tiny creatures are digging down, stirring oxygen into sediments, reshaping the seafloor itself. This is called bioturbation, though at this early stage, it's still baby steps. Still, it's enough to rewrite the rules of chemistry down there. Suddenly, nutrients flow differently, oxygen penetrates deeper, and ecosystems shift. These small wriggles, as humble as they seem, are tectonic moves in the history of life. Of course, historians and paleontologists don't fully agree on how much oxygen mattered. Some argue it was the master key that unlocked everything. Others say life would have found a way regardless, that ecological arms races mattered more than breathable air. They debate across conference tables, point to graphs, argue over isotopes. And maybe both are right, because Earth is rarely stingy. It usually throws several dice at once. The light fades toward evening, and the sea glows faintly under the dying sun. You imagine the molecules of oxygen rising, invisible sparks drifting upward, changing the sky itself. Stars wait overhead, unseen through the haze. But they too depend on this gamble, for without it, no creature would ever look up and wonder about them. You lie back, weightless, the waves carrying you like a cradle. You can almost hear the ocean whisper, not yet, but soon. Not yet the explosion, not yet the spectacle, but soon. The dice are rolling, the gamble is being won, and the stage is nearly ready. The night drapes itself across those ancient shores, and you find yourself crouched near the seabed, your fingers brushing the damp grit of a world about to change. If the oxygen gamble was the air, then the architects you're about to meet are the builders. They are small, almost invisible to your naked eye, but they're doing something audacious. They are experimenting with structure. Tiny architects, laying the first beams and scaffolds of complexity in a world still learning how to breathe. You lean closer, as if peering through a magnifying glass, and suddenly the mats of goo and slime are more than just biological carpeting. Within them, colonies of cells are joining forces, linking membranes, whispering in chemical codes. The leap from single cell to multicellular body has already begun. Not a leap, really, but a series of tiny steps, like toddlers stacking blocks until a tower wobbles upward. These clusters of cells are the ancestors of creatures that will one day have limbs, eyes, and backbones. But here, for now, they are only fragile blueprints, drafts sketched in cytoplasm. Imagine slime molds pulsing across the sediment, stretching and contracting as if breathing. Picture simple filaments of algae weaving tapestries across the seabed, strands of green light glowing faintly in the shallows. They are the construction crews of early life, tirelessly knitting together molecules of cellulose, proteins, and chitin, the same substances that will one day become wood, shells, and insect exoskeletons. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear their faint scratching, like the sound of pencils on paper. The ocean itself helps them, supplying calcium, silica, and carbon like a warehouse of raw materials. Slowly, almost shyly, organisms begin to incorporate these into their bodies. Tiny spicules of silica form in sponge-like creatures, delicate frameworks sparkling like glass under the filtered sun. These are the first bones of the biosphere, too small to impress you now, but monumental in implication. They are practice runs, prototypes. The way an architect sketches towers on napkins before building skyscrapers. You kneel in the shallow water, scooping up a handful of sand, and notice microscopic grains of calcium carbonate beginning to accumulate. Here is the mortar, the cement that will someday hold together reefs, cliffs, even mountain ranges made entirely of fossilized skeletons. For now, it is simply dust, gathering quietly, waiting to be shaped. A little-known truth. Some of the earliest structural experiments involved slime itself. Mats of bacteria created stromatolites, layered rocky formations that rose from the seafloor like pancakes stacked by someone half asleep. They don't look like much, but for nearly 3 billion years, stromatolites were the tallest buildings on Earth. Entire coastlines were lined with them, monuments built not by human hands, but by microscopic persistence. Even today, you can still find living stromatolites in a few hidden corners of the world. Shallow bays in Australia, for example. Silent witnesses to a craft that began before animals even dreamed of existing. As you float above these tiny architects, you sense the quiet ambition of their work. Complexity is addictive. Once cells tasted cooperation, they didn't stop. They invented adhesion molecules, biological glue that let them stick together. They invented signaling pathways, tiny whispers that told one cell when to divide, another when to stay put. They invented differentiation, some cells taking on one role, others another, like the first rehearsals of a theater troupe learning parts for a play. You might chuckle, because from your vantage point, these plays are still clumsy improvisations. A cluster of cells might grow too fast, collapse, dissolve. Another might succeed for a moment, only to be eaten by a neighbor. The stagehands are still fumbling with the curtains. But in these fumbles lie the first drafts of organs, tissues, systems that will one day power animals through oceans, skies, and forests. The seabed glimmers under the fractured light. It feels oddly peaceful, as though time itself has slowed to watch these architects at work. And maybe, in a way, it has. Each innovation takes millions of years, each new blueprint tested over eons. You're standing in the middle of the longest construction project in history, one where deadlines don't exist, and failure is just another word for learning. Historians and scientists still debate how much of this architecture happened before the Cambrian versus during it. Were multicellular animals already diversifying quietly in the shadows, waiting for their moment to shine? Or did most of the blueprints emerge suddenly, like a lightning strike of creativity? The fossil record is hazy here, as fossils of soft-bodied architects rarely survive. The arguments rage on, but to you, standing ankle-deep in their world, the outcome feels inevitable. The blueprints are too promising, too persistent to be lost forever. You glance upward, watching the stars shimmer faintly through the haze of ancient air. The ocean laps around you, whispering against the sand, as if reminding you that even the greatest architects begin small. A grain of silica here, a protein scaffold there, and soon enough, entire kingdoms of life will be built upon these foundations. You close your eyes and drift, lulled by the gentle push and pull of water. The architects continue their tireless work, unaware of you, unaware of the story they're writing. And as you sink deeper into that rhythm, you realize the world is no longer static. It is under construction, scaffolds rising invisibly, walls being tested, ceilings stretched higher and higher. The project is underway, and it will not stop until oceans awaken with creatures stranger and grander than you can imagine. The tide pulls you further, as though the ocean itself has chosen to reveal its secrets in sequence, like pages of a book that only it can turn. The architects have laid their scaffolds, the blueprints are whispering in cell clusters, and now, the stage is nearly ready for its first true cast of characters. But before the actors take the floor, the theater needs something else: defenses, weapons, and a spark of conflict. You hover just above the seafloor, watching as the microscopic dramas begin to unfold. Cooperation has given rise to bodies larger than single cells, but with size comes vulnerability. A bigger body is also a bigger target, and so life does what life always does. It adapts. Some cells develop thicker walls, tougher coats, skeleton-like shards. Others sharpen themselves. Tiny chemical daggers, molecular toxins brewed in sacs and vesicles. For every invention of protection, there comes an invention of attack. If the earlier seas felt like a neighborhood of quiet architects, now it feels more like a laboratory of arms dealers. Picture bacteria that once only absorbed food now secreting poisons, ambushing neighbors. Picture simple worms experimenting with burrows, digging into sediment not for fun but for safety. The seabed becomes a battlefield of trial and error, not bloody in your sense. There is no red, no screams, but relentless all the same. You trail your fingers along the sediment and notice the first traces of something extraordinary. Burrows. They snake through the mud, winding and twisting. Tunnels made not by currents, but by living beings. These are the fingerprints of fear and of strategy. The simple mats of life that once covered the seafloor are now punctured, riddled with escape routes. Life is learning not just how to exist, but how to survive pursuit. Predation, though still primitive, is the great accelerator. Once you have hunters, you must have speed, armor, cunning. The evolutionary arms race begins quietly here, and it will never end. You might even smile, realizing that every hawk chasing a mouse, every wolf stalking a deer, every human soldier plotting war, all of it echoes this first underwater whisper of chase and escape. The water around you stirs with invisible currents. Small multicellular organisms wriggle, jerk, and dart away from unseen threats. They are soft-bodied, fragile, but some are experimenting with rigidity, microscopic plates that will one day become shells. Others turn flexible, coiling and uncoiling with surprising speed. Flexibility or armor? That is the question now. Both are costly, but both may save a lineage from extinction. You sense the tension deepening. It is no longer enough to merely exist. To endure, One must outwit, outlast, or overpower the other. And in that tension, creativity explodes. Neural nets begin to whisper inside fragile bodies. Rudimentary nervous systems that allow quicker responses, faster reflexes. Muscles develop, first as weak fibrils, then as coordinated waves. Suddenly, life can do more than drift. It can flee, it can chase, it can fight. This is the real rehearsal before the Cambrian curtain rises. The weapons are still crude, the armor thin, the movements awkward, but the script is being written line by line, scene by scene. One creature bites, another burrows. One creature hardens, another speeds away. And beneath it all, the invisible hand of natural selection scribbles notes in the margins. This works, keep it. That fails, discard it. You stand in awe, realizing that you are watching the very birth of conflict. Not human conflict with flags and speeches, but the raw biological tension that will one day give rise to it. Without this early arms race, there would be no sharks, no tigers, no humans with spears. Struggle is the sculptor, carving strength and shape out of formless flesh. The seabed glows faintly under the last light, filtering from above. Sediment swirls around you as burrows collapse and are rebuilt, each one a testament to persistence. Tiny creatures, still nameless to you, swim awkwardly past, some destined to vanish without a trace, others fated to leave imprints that paleontologists millions of years later will puzzle over in stone slabs. It feels almost intimate watching them. You want to tell them that their struggles matter, that the skirmishes playing out in silence here will echo into ages they cannot imagine. But they do not need your reassurance. They are driven by instincts far older than comfort, the need to live, to reproduce, to pass on blueprints that may one day become extraordinary. The tide tugs at your ankles again. The world around you hums with tension. A theater about to raise its curtains. You realize you are standing not just in a sea of water, but in a sea of possibility. Possibility sharpened by teeth, armored by shells, and quickened by muscle and nerve. Soon, very soon, the Cambrian stage will blaze with performers unlike anything yet seen. But here, in this twilight rehearsal, you understand something essential. Life's beauty is born from its struggles, and its creativity blooms brightest when survival is at stake. You close your eyes, lulled by the push and pull of invisible wars around you, and drift into the rhythm of an ocean rehearsing for its greatest explosion of all. The tide draws you deeper, as though the ocean itself has decided the stage is now set. The rehearsal of burrows, poisons, and awkward muscles has prepared the world for something grander. And then, almost without warning, the curtain rises. This is not a gentle unveiling. It is a floodlight suddenly thrown on in a dark theater. Shapes that never existed before surge into being, and you, caught in the middle, can only marvel as the Cambrian explosion begins in earnest. The water around you feels crowded, not with the soft, uncertain blobs of earlier ages, but with defined bodies, articulated limbs and eyes. Yes, eyes that can actually see you, though they do not know what you are. Trilobites scuttle across the seafloor, armored like tanks, their jointed legs propelling them with a confidence earlier creatures never possessed. They are the first celebrities of this age, destined to dominate for hundreds of millions of years. You reach out, and one ripples past, its carapace gleaming like bronze under the filtered light. You notice something odd. Trilobites aren't just armored, they're organized. Segments align like careful stitching, each plate an interlocking piece of natural armor. They dig, crawl, swim. Versatility is their survival strategy. For a moment, you imagine them as the cockroaches of this ancient sea, tireless, adaptive, impossible to ignore. Some even roll into tight balls when threatened. A defense so clever, you almost laugh at how familiar it feels, like a prehistoric pill bug curling on your porch. But trilobites are not alone. Floating above are creatures stranger still. Opabinia, with 5 eyes and a long, hose-like proboscis ending in a claw. You stare, half horrified, half delighted. 5 eyes are perhaps excessive, but in this world of predators and prey, redundancy is security. The proboscis darts, grasping unsuspecting worms and pulling them into a waiting mouth hidden under its body. You think, not for the first time, that nature's imagination is far wilder than yours could ever be. Then comes Anomalocaris. Larger than anything else around, it glides through the water with a fluid grace that seems unfair. Its body ripples like a living torpedo, fringed with flaps that act as wings. Twin grasping appendages stretch out like the claws of a mantis, snaring trilobites and cracking their armor. Its mouth is a circular buzzsaw of plates, rotating to crush and grind. If trilobites are tanks, Anomalocaris is the submarine with torpedoes. You instinctively back away, even though you know it cannot touch you. Survival reflexes run deep. And yet, beauty is here too. Waiwaxia crawls gently across the seabed, its body covered in spines that catch the dim light like silver needles. Hallucigenia tiptoes on absurdly long legs, its back bristling with spikes like a walking hallucination. Hence the name. Once upon a time, paleontologists even mounted it upside down in reconstructions, convinced its spines were legs. You chuckle softly at the thought. Even experts can be baffled by the creativity of ancient seas. The water grows thick with life. Everywhere you turn, something new swims, crawls, or drifts past. Worms with teeth, creatures with shells, organisms experimenting with symmetry, bilateral, radial, and everything in between. The diversity is dizzying, as though evolution, pent up for eons, is now furiously scribbling ideas in every margin. Some sketches will endure, refined across ages. Others will be abandoned prototypes, destined to vanish into extinction. You pause and let the scene wash over you. Never before has Earth seen such a burst of innovation. The Cambrian Explosion is not just an event. It's a symphony, a riot of experimentation that will echo across all of history. Arms, legs, eyes, skeletons, jaws. So many of the tools you take for granted begin here. Without this outpouring of forms, the future would be empty, barren of dinosaurs, birds, mammals, and eventually, humans. The seafloor vibrates faintly beneath your feet, not from tectonic plates this time, but from movement. An ecosystem bustling, shifting, predating, reproducing. Life is no longer a backdrop. It is the main act. Every niche is filling. Scavengers sifting sediment, grazers nibbling microbial mats, predators hunting the hunters. You tilt your head, wondering how all this could arise so quickly. Was it oxygen levels rising, granting the energy to build complex bodies? Was it the invention of eyes, suddenly making camouflage, speed, and armor matters of life and death? Or was it simply the culmination of eons of genetic tinkering, waiting for the right spark? Historians and scientists still debate, each offering elegant arguments, each pointing to fragments of evidence. You smile knowingly. Sometimes the truth is not a single answer, but the harmony of many. Above, sunlight filters down like liquid gold, fracturing into beams that illuminate trilobite trails and spiny silhouettes. The ocean feels less like a void now, more like a marketplace of strategies. You are surrounded by possibility incarnate, and yet you feel strangely calm. Perhaps it's the rhythm of the water, or the knowledge that you are watching the first real drama of life unfold. A trilobite scuttles across your toes, unbothered by your presence. You crouch, following its trail until it disappears into a burrow. A small reminder that even in this era of grandeur, survival often means hiding. Somewhere in the distance, a shadow passes, a larger predator sweeping the stage. The smaller creatures scatter, vanishing into mud, shells, or sudden bursts of speed. The arms race is in full swing now, and no one is safe for long. Still, amidst the danger, there is wonder. Each shape, each motion, is a story being told for the first time. The ocean is no longer merely awake. It is alive in a way that feels unstoppable. You take a deep breath, though the air belongs to another world above, and let the current carry you further into the theater of Earth's first great explosion of life. The ocean no longer feels like a quiet cradle. It feels like a carnival. Everywhere you look, creatures dart, creep, and shimmer, as though life itself has decided to throw a masquerade ball. The Cambrian seas are alive not only with strange forms, but with abundance. Millions upon millions of organisms crowding the stage in a performance that has no intermission. And in this swell of diversity, you notice something profound: patterns. You drift closer to the seafloor, brushing aside a cloud of silt stirred by trilobite legs. Among the chaos, certain designs repeat. Bodies divided into left and right halves, mirrored like folded paper. Bilateral symmetry. Not every creature adopts it, but many do, and you realize why. It grants direction. A front end means you can lead with your senses, follow with your body, and push into the world with intent. Symmetry, simple as it seems, is a revolution. It is the blueprint that will echo from trilobites to tigers. Near your feet, a small eel-like creature undulates through the water. Its name will one day be Pikaia, and though it looks unremarkable, a mere sliver of flesh with a faint dorsal cord, it is history's quiet prodigy. That flexible rod in its back is a notochord, the faint whisper of a spine. You watch it bend and twist, propelling itself with more grace than its neighbors. It does not know it, but it is the ancestor of vertebrates, of fish, of reptiles, of birds, of mammals, of you. You want to bow in respect, but Pikaia is too busy fleeing a hungry Anomalocaris to care. The more you look, the more you see this explosion is not random at all. Each lineage is testing blueprints, refining them, pushing them forward. Some sprout legs like appendages to stir the mud. Some refine gills to pull oxygen from the water more efficiently. Others develop harder exoskeletons, plates that glint like jewels under the fractured sunlight. Each experiment is part of an evolutionary arms race, but also part of an unspoken collaboration. One innovation creates pressure for another, and so the cycle spins faster and faster. Above you, jelly-like creatures drift lazily, translucent bells pulsing with hypnotic rhythm. They are reminders that not all life needs armor or weapons. Some prefer grace and drift carried by the tides. Yet even they evolve, sprouting stinging cells that can paralyze the small and unwary. The lesson is the same: do something or risk becoming lunch. You can't help but notice how familiar some of these strategies feel. The trilobites rolling into balls like modern pill bugs. The spine bodies of Wywaxia recalling sea urchins. The nervous wriggle of Pikaia hinting at fish. You realize with a shiver that the Cambrian seas are not just alien. They are familiar in embryonic form. The blueprints that will sculpt the modern world are being tested here, and you are watching the drafts unfold. The sediment beneath you is riddled with tracks and tunnels. Once they were mere scratches. Now they are highways. Creatures are no longer just drifting. They are engineers, reshaping the seafloor itself. Burrows become refuges, trails become hunting grounds. And in these small acts of digging and hiding, ecosystems are born. Life is learning to transform its environment, a skill it will never forget. You pause and wonder, why now? Why does this explosion happen here, in this moment of Earth's history? Some scholars argue it is oxygen, enough at last to fuel complexity. Others claim it is the invention of vision, the first predator-prey arms race ignited by sight itself. Still others suggest the chemistry of the oceans changed, offering the minerals needed for shells and bones. Each theory has merit, and perhaps they are all true at once. Like a perfect storm, factors converged, and the result is this dazzling spectacle. A trilobite scurries over your hand, pausing for a moment as though to appraise you. Its compound eyes glitter with dozens of lenses, each capturing fragments of a world that is suddenly crowded and perilous. You almost laugh. If eyes had existed earlier, perhaps the world would have awoken sooner. Vision is power, and power always changes the game. The water hums with life. Shadows sweep past. Small fish-like swimmers dart between clusters of spiny worms, and the great Anomalocaris prowls in the distance, the apex predator of its age. The Cambrian seas are not peaceful, but they are spectacular. In every chase, in every burrow, in every shimmering plate of armor, you see the foundation of all futures being laid brick by brick. You take a deep breath, though no oxygen reaches your lungs here. Instead, you breathe in the rhythm of history, the realization that your own body, your own spine and senses trace their lineage back to this moment. You are not separate from these seas. You are their child, walking through time to visit your birthplace. As the tide pulls you onward, you glance back. Trilobites scuttle, Picaia wriggles, Hallucigenia tiptoes absurdly through the sediment. They are strange, yes, but also familiar. You smile at the thought, this is not just the story of ocean's awakening. It is the story of you, whispered in the language of spines and symmetry. The tide carries you further into the Cambrian seas, and with every drift of current, you sense a change. The ocean is no longer just a gallery of curious forms. It is a battlefield. Not a battlefield of soldiers and banners, but of teeth and armor, speed and stealth. Survival here is not guaranteed. It is earned. You feel it immediately in the tension of the water. A trilobite scuttles quickly past your feet, antennae twitching. A shadow sweeps above, and the trilobite vanishes into a shallow burrow. Moments later, an Anomalocaris glides overhead, its grasping appendages flexing like loaded traps. You can almost hear the silent drumbeat of pursuit, the chase that now defines existence. Predation, once a whisper, is now a roar. Everywhere you turn, creatures are adapting to this new game. Some grow faster, muscles coiling in powerful waves that allow sudden bursts of speed. Others toughen their shells, turning their bodies into fortresses. A few even experiment with camouflage, blending into the mottled seafloor, hiding in plain sight. The diversity you admired in the last chapter is now sharpening itself against the whetstone of danger. You kneel and scoop a handful of sediment through your fingers, watching tiny creatures dart among the grains. Their burrows weave intricate networks, more complex than before. These are not just homes, they are fortifications, bunkers against marauders. Life is no longer satisfied with simply existing. It is digging, building, plotting. You realize with a shiver that strategy itself was born here, long before humans drew their first maps of war. Above, the water shimmers with translucent forms. Early swimming arthropods like Waptia, flicking their paddle-like limbs in quick succession. They move with surprising grace, dodging predators with tight maneuvers. Some even cluster in groups, schooling together the way modern fish do. Safety, it seems, can come not just from armor, but from numbers. And then, a stranger appears. Marella, a delicate arthropod with feathery appendages and a spiny tail. It scuttles like a nervous dancer, waving its limbs to stir currents and sense its surroundings. You crouch closer, mesmerized by the complexity of its body plan. Antennae for detection, spines for protection, legs for crawling, gills fluttering in rhythm. Marella may never grow as famous as trilobites, but in its quiet perfection, you sense the promise of future crustaceans, insects, and arachnids. The blueprint is here, sketched in living ink. You can't help but laugh softly at the absurdity of some strategies. Hallucigenia, still walking on its spindly legs, bristles its back spines like a punk rocker defying predators. Waiwaxia, covered in scales and spikes, crawls along as if it dressed in medieval armor for a morning stroll. Each adaptation looks ridiculous in isolation, yet together they form the grand collage of evolution's creativity. And then you remember the rule: for every defense, a stronger offense arises. You glance into the distance and see the looming silhouette of Anomalocaris again, circling with patient grace. Its compound eyes scan the seafloor, its body rippling with predatory confidence. The trilobite's armor may hold for now, but the predator's buzzsaw mouth grinds relentlessly, testing weaknesses. The arms race spirals forward, each innovation met with another. Historians still debate what triggered this escalation. Was it truly the invention of eyes, forcing creatures to move or be eaten? Was it the rise of larger predators, forcing prey to dig and harden? Or was it simply the abundance of life itself? Too many mouths, too few resources, driving innovation through conflict. You smile knowingly. Perhaps it was all of these at once, a perfect storm that made the Cambrian seas into nature's first war zone. You notice how strangely familiar it feels. The trilobite's rolled-up defense echoes the armadillo. The predator's pursuit mirrors a lion's chase. Even your own heartbeat quickens, as if ancient instincts remember these battles. The drama of predator and prey did not begin with humans. It began here, in shallow seas 500 million years ago. And yet, even in this theater of danger, there is wonder. The ocean glitters with possibility, each creature a unique solution to the same problem: how to survive long enough to leave descendants. Some succeed, some fail, but all are part of the symphony. You realize with quiet awe that struggle itself is creative. Without predators, prey would never innovate. Without danger, beauty would never sharpen its edges. You let yourself drift with the current, watching the spectacle unfold. Creatures chase, flee, burrow, bite, and hide. The Cambrian seas are alive not only with form, but with story. Every shell, every spine, every flick of a fin is a chapter written in the great book of survival. And though the words are ancient and the ink is living flesh, the tale they tell is timeless. Life endures by becoming more. The tide tugs at you again, as if eager to show you what comes next. You glance once more at the trilobite trails, the darting Waptia, the looming shadow of Anomalocaris, and you understand. The arms race has only just begun. The ocean is sharpening its tools, and the world will never be the same again. The ocean cradles you in its endless sway, and you feel the tempo change again. Where before there was chaos, predator and prey clashing like cymbals, now there is something subtler, more layered. The Cambrian seas are not just a battlefield anymore. They are weaving themselves into webs, connections drawn between hunters, grazers, scavengers, and builders. For the first time in Earth's history, true ecosystems are emerging. You glance across the seafloor and see trilobites clustered in small groups, scuttling along the sediment like armored harvesters. They rake through microbial mats, grazing efficiently, leaving behind trails that others quickly follow. Overhead, Vaptia dart between the shadows, their paddle limbs flashing in silver rhythm. Above them, jelly-like drifters pulse lazily, catching sunlight and converting it into energy before sinking back down as food for others. The cycle is no longer linear. It is a network. Energy flows from sunlight to plankton, to grazers, to predators, and finally to scavengers who recycle what's left. For the first time, you sense balance. Not peace, but balance. Even Anomalocaris, the terror of earlier chapters, has a place in this system, keeping trilobite numbers in check, ensuring grazers don't strip the seafloor bare. You smile at the irony. The monster is not a villain. It is a gardener, pruning the web of life by accident. Look closer, and you'll notice tiny architects at work, Sponges anchor themselves to rocks, filtering water with rhythmic patience. They are not flashy, but they are essential, pumping clarity into the sea, creating microhabitats for smaller creatures. Some worms, once mere burrowers, now build sturdy tubes from sand and secretions, turning their homes into miniature fortresses. Life is no longer just reacting. It is engineering. You reach down and brush a patch of sediment, only to find it studded with fragments of tiny, calcareous skeletons. These are the beginnings of reefs, small, tentative at first, but destined to grow into sprawling underwater cities. Reefs are more than decoration. They are foundations. In their cracks and crevices, new species will shelter, hunt, and evolve. The ocean is learning how to construct neighborhoods. The Cambrian seas also hum with smaller dramas. Near a sponge forest, a group of marella scuttles together, cleaning detritus from the seafloor. They are recyclers, ensuring nothing goes to waste. Behind them, worms lurk, waiting to snatch a careless grazer. Above, tiny plankton drift, unaware they are fueling the entire pyramid. For the first time, you see the ocean not just as a stage, but as a city. Bustling, layered, interdependent. And yet, balance never means safety. A shadow passes, and chaos erupts. Trilobites scatter, Voptia dart upward, and a lurking Anomalocaris swoops in, scattering the crowd like pigeons in a plaza. The web stretches and trembles, but it holds. When the predator glides away, the grazers return, the scavengers resume their cleanup, the filters keep pumping. This is resilience, the ability of the system to absorb shocks and continue. Without realizing it, the Cambrian seas have invented stability. You pause, drifting in the current, and marvel at the complexity. You once thought the Cambrian Explosion was about shapes, spines, shells, eyes, claws. But now you see it is equally about relationships. Each adaptation is not only a tool for survival, but a thread in a vast tapestry of interactions. Energy flows, niches form, balance emerges. The Cambrian is not just an explosion of bodies, it is an explosion of connections. Historians still debate the exact triggers of these ecosystems. Was it oxygen again, providing enough fuel to sustain layers of complexity? Was it the invention of burrows, reshaping the seafloor into a dynamic landscape? Or perhaps it was simply the sheer number of species, forcing them into roles that overlapped, competed, and intertwined. The answer, as always, may be all of them. Evolution does not favor simplicity. It thrives on entanglement. You catch sight of a trilobite rolling into a ball as another brushes past. Safety and cooperation overlap here, even if unintentionally. Small clusters of grazers seem to feed together, perhaps by chance, perhaps because numbers reduce risk. Already, the faint whisper of future herds and flocks can be heard in the rustle of trilobite legs. The reefs, though tiny now, seem to glow with promise. You run your fingers across their rough surfaces, feeling life cling stubbornly to every crevice. These are the prototypes of coral kingdoms, the cradles of biodiversity yet to come. Fish, reptiles, mammals, they will all owe a debt to these humble structures first pieced together in the Cambrian dusk. The current presses against you, steady and insistent. You realize it mirrors the story itself, a continuous flow, always moving forward, weaving chaos into order. For the first time, Earth is not just alive, it is organized. And in that organization lies the resilience to endure, to diversify, to thrive. As you drift away, you glance back at the busy seafloor, the reefs rising like scaffolds, the trilobites grazing, the predators circling. You see not just creatures, but a system, a living web of relationships that will stretch forward into every forest, desert, and savanna. The Cambrian seas are no longer merely awakening. They are humming, resonating with the first true harmony of life. You float a little longer, and the rhythm of the water shifts again, becoming sharper, quicker, Something is different now. The ocean, once blind chaos, begins to shimmer with awareness. For the first time, the Cambrian seas are not only alive, they are alert. Creatures are no longer stumbling through instinct alone. They are sensing, responding, and even, in their own quiet ways, communicating. You notice it first in the eyes. Trilobites crawl by, and when a shadow crosses overhead, they freeze. Their compound eyes, mosaics of tiny lenses, capture not just light, but motion. They scuttle away before the predator strikes, a reflex born of sight. You blink, remembering the earlier world when life had no eyes at all. Imagine going from a universe of pitch-black radio static to suddenly seeing in high definition. It's as though someone flipped on the cosmic Wi-Fi. And yet, trilobite vision is only the beginning. Far above, tiny creatures float, sensitive not only to light, but to the faintest vibrations in the water. Their nerves spark at ripples you can barely feel. These are the first whispers of hearing, though muffled and primitive. You watch them flinch at a wave sent by a darting predator. Awareness is no longer just about reacting. It is about predicting, sensing danger before it arrives. Near the seafloor, worms extend bristles and twitch when a trilobite brushes past. A fraction of a second later, the worm retreats into its burrow, the movement guided not by accident, but by nerve fibers strung like living wires. The Cambrian is teaching bodies to think, to transmit, to coordinate. Nervous systems, once little more than chemical whispers, are becoming electrical symphonies. You imagine yourself inside one of these creatures. Light flares across lenses, signals race down nerves, muscles twitch in response. It feels oddly modern, as though the blueprint for your own senses is being sketched in these ancient waters. You wiggle your toes, your nervous system doing the same trick, just with more polish. Some creatures go further, experimenting with communication. Waiwaxia, armored with scales, seems to recognize others of its kind, clustering in loose groups. Perhaps they sense each other through chemicals drifting in the current, like perfumes in a crowded room. A trilobite taps its antennae against another, exchanging subtle signals you can't decode, but no matter deeply to them. These are the first conversations, tiny Morse codes of touch and scent. The predators, too, evolve sharper senses. Anomalocaris hovers, swiveling its stalked eyes like searchlights. It doesn't just see prey, it tracks them, anticipates their turns. Its nervous system, primitive though it is, functions like a hunting computer, processing input and predicting outcomes. You shiver at the thought. In these waters, whoever can sense first survives. The ocean is now alive with signals. Chemical trails waft like invisible ink, guiding grazers to food and predators to grazers. Shadows flicker, triggering escape reflexes. Vibrations ripple outward, warning some and betraying others. Life is no longer reacting blindly. It is engaged in an invisible dialogue, a constant chatter of sense and response. Historians still debate how quickly nervous systems spread and which came first: sight, smell, touch, or sound. Some argue vision changed everything, opening new predator-prey dynamics. Others point to the humble nerve net, arguing that the ability to coordinate muscles was the real revolution. As usual, the answer is not neat. Life rarely innovates in straight lines. It experiments in parallel, tossing out ideas like a brainstorming session in a chaotic lab meeting. One strange fact catches your attention. Trilobites may have been capable of seeing ultraviolet light. Imagine that. Them cruising along the seafloor with built-in blacklight goggles, like nightclub bouncers for a world with no clubs. They probably weren't checking IDs, but they were definitely seeing things you can't. Everywhere you look, behavior grows more complex. A trilobite pauses at the edge of a burrow, as though deciding whether to risk it. A worm lunges, misses, retreats. These are not just reflexes, they are choices, however small. Awareness is branching out, teaching creatures not only how to survive, but how to gamble, to test, to learn. You realize that the Cambrian Explosion is no longer just an arms race of weapons and armor. It is a race of information. Whoever senses the environment best, whoever processes signals quickest, gains the edge. Life has invented strategy, and in that realization, you feel the stirrings of something larger. The nervous systems weaving through these ancient bodies are not random sparks. They are the foundations of memory, of learning, of experience. The same principles humming in a trilobite's antennae will one day hum in your brain as you drift off to sleep, remembering this very story. The current carries you onward, past trilobites clicking antennae, predators stalking with vision, grazers following chemical trails. The sea feels louder now, though not with sound, louder with awareness. The Cambrian has invented perception, and with it, the stage is set for everything that follows. Fear, curiosity, choice, and, eventually, thought. The rhythm shifts again, and you feel the ocean tighten, as though it is bracing itself. For a while, everything had been spiraling upward. New eyes, sharper jaws, stronger shells. But nature does not let growth climb forever without testing it. There are breaks hidden in the system, and the Cambrian is about to pull them hard. The first sign comes as a stillness in the water. You drift along the seabed, noticing abandoned burrows, shells lying empty, trails that begin and abruptly end. Something has disrupted the rhythm of life, and it isn't just one predator growing too strong. No, this is bigger, systemic. Temperatures wobble, oxygen drops. The ocean breathes shallowly, and many of its new creations cannot keep pace. For the first time in this story, extinction takes center stage. Whole lineages blink out, erased before they can leave much fossil record. Imagine a grand fireworks display, brilliant sparks arcing skyward, only to be smothered by sudden rain. That's what happens here. Evolution launches dazzling experiments, and then, with a hiccup in climate, a chemical imbalance, or a shift in currents, the lights go out. Some researchers argue that early volcanic events may have choked the atmosphere with ash, dimming sunlight. Others suggest fluctuations in ocean chemistry, spikes in hydrogen sulfide, deadly to most multicellular life. The truth, as always, is messy, and history doesn't keep receipts. But whatever the trigger, the effect is clear. Diversity crashes. The Cambrian is not a smooth climb, but a stuttering dance of bursts and die-offs. You lean closer to the seafloor, tracing a trilobite carapace fossilizing before your eyes. Once abundant, its kind has vanished from this patch of ocean. A cluster of tiny worms, once weaving intricate burrows, has collapsed into silence. You might think extinction is only tragedy, but watch long enough, and you see the strange gift hidden inside. With niches emptied, survivors adapt and spread, taking up abandoned roles. In a way, extinction is the editor of evolution. It crosses out whole paragraphs of possibility, forcing the survivors to rewrite the story. Without these edits, the narrative might drown in excess. With them, the script sharpens, characters deepen. The Cambrian seas are cruel, but they are also efficient. There is an odd calm in watching this turnover. Life, fragile and exuberant, is learning how to endure collapse. Some creatures retreat into sturdier shells, some gamble on faster reproduction, some burrow deeper to escape poisoned waters. These are desperate strategies, but desperation can be inventive. The arms race continues, even under pressure. One peculiar survivor you notice is the trilobite again. While many lineages die, trilobites endure, not because they are invincible, but because they are adaptable. They diversify their body plans, spreading into new roles: crawlers, burrowers, swimmers. They remind you of weeds cracking through pavement, humble, persistent, almost irritating in their resilience. And yet, that persistence will let them thrive for 270 million years, far outlasting the Cambrian itself. Historians still debate how severe these early Cambrian extinctions were. Were they global catastrophes or regional stumbles? Did they prune entire families or just thin out populations? The fossil record whispers but does not shout. You imagine paleontologists hunched over shale slabs, arguing like detectives piecing together a mystery with most of the evidence burned away. A strange thought crosses your mind. Maybe extinction is as fundamental as birth. Without it, the tree of life would be a tangled mass, overcrowded with endless branches. Instead, pruning keeps the shape open, letting new sunlight reach new leaves. The Cambrian oceans, harsh though they are cultivating not just survival, but resilience. You picture modern parallels, a wildfire clearing a forest, brutal in the moment, but making room for fresh growth. The Cambrian extinctions, too, are wildfires in the ocean. Life recoils, but then rebounds, stronger, stranger, more varied. And you, standing here in the dim water, feel both sorrow and awe. Whole lineages vanish without ceremony, but from their absence, the survivors flourish. The silence left by one creature becomes the stage for another's innovation. In that silence, you realize, lies the seed of progress. The tide nudges you forward. The ocean has tested its creations with death, and still the theater remains. The curtain trembles again, ready to lift for yet another act, one even more dazzling than before. The water grows restless again, but this time it isn't collapse. It's choreography. You sense a pattern forming, as though the chaos of teeth, shells, and burrows has finally found its rhythm. The Cambrian seas are no longer just scattered experiments. They are ecosystems, balanced in a fragile but functional dance. Look down at the seafloor. Trilobites scuttle across sediment, scraping up algae, leaving trails like etchings in wet clay. Behind them, worm-like creatures slip through their tunnels, stirring nutrients, aerating the seabed. Overhead, swimming predators like Anomalocaris glide in slow arcs, their compound eyes searching for movement, antennae twitching like antennae of some alien submarine. Suddenly it feels less like chaos and more like a city. An ancient alien city where every citizen has a role, and roles matter. For every grazer munching algae, there is a scavenger cleaning up scraps. For every predator lunging, there is prey darting away, shaping speed and armor. This push and pull stabilizes the community. The Cambrian Ocean is inventing jobs: farmer, builder, cleaner, hunter, thief. You could almost print a business card for each lineage. A trilobite stumbles into view. It pauses to nibble at the microbial mats still clinging stubbornly to patches of seafloor. Without realizing it, the trilobite is cultivating those mats, keeping them trimmed, letting sunlight reach deeper. Above, floating filter feeders gulp plankton, while larger predators keep them in check. The balance is precarious but real. Energy flows, waste recycles, the city hums. You notice burrows again, but now they seem less desperate. Instead of pure escape tunnels, some are cozy homes, dens for creatures who know their neighbors. They dig not just to hide, but to claim space, to organize the seafloor into districts. You imagine a trilobite as a grumpy landlord, scuttling past a worm's doorway, muttering about rent. Predation still dominates, but it no longer feels like raw panic. It has become a system. Prey are not always annihilated. Many survive, reproduce, replenish. Predators don't wipe everything out, because extinction of prey would mean extinction of predator. In this uneasy equilibrium, life begins to pulse in cycles, boom and bust, but never total collapse. And yet, the city isn't static. Strange forms keep wandering in. Spiny hallucigenia strolls by, absurd as ever, like someone's failed doodle that somehow walked off the page. Opabinia swims with its bizarre 5 eyes swiveling, trunk-like snout probing the sand. They don't fit into neat categories, but the city makes room. Diversity isn't just tolerated, it strengthens the whole. You hover, struck by how modern it feels. Predator-prey cycles, nutrient recycling, niche occupation. These are the same principles that run your own ecosystems today. Swap trilobites for cows, Anomalocaris for wolves, microbial mats for grasslands, and the blueprint is nearly identical. The Cambrian has built the foundation of the biosphere you still depend on. Historians often argue whether this was the true beginning of complex food webs. Some claim earlier ecosystems had already experimented with balance, but it is here, in the Cambrian, that the structures become undeniable. For the first time, the ocean runs like a living machine, its gears meshing, its parts interdependent. There's even evidence of scavenging behaviors, creatures feasting on corpses rather than just hunting. It may sound morbid, but scavenging is ecological gold, preventing waste from piling up, recycling nutrients quickly. Without scavengers, ecosystems stall. You almost chuckle, realizing that even in the Cambrian, somebody had already signed up for garbage duty. One strange, little-known fact: some trilobites practiced molting, shedding their exoskeletons as they grew. Those discarded shells piled up on the seafloor, becoming miniature reefs for other creatures to hide in. A predator's failed meal became another's sanctuary. Even accidents became architecture. You run your hand through the water, feeling the hum of this balance. It's imperfect, fragile, and constantly shifting, but it works. The Cambrian Ocean is no longer just a gallery of weird experiments. It has become a system that feeds itself, regulates itself, and, most importantly, persists. For a fleeting moment, you feel the comfort of stability. It's like watching a neighborhood settle after years of construction dust and endless jackhammers. The houses are built, the gardens planted, the traffic patterns established. Sure, there are still robberies and accidents, but life has learned how to keep the lights on. And yet, you know what history teaches? Stability never lasts forever. The Cambrian's bustling city will be tested again, shaken, reshaped. But for now, here in this moment, the ocean has found its rhythm. Life is not only surviving, it is thriving. The tide tugs you gently onward, and you can't help but wonder, if this ancient city of trilobites and worms feels so alive, what grander cities still lie ahead in Earth's future? The calm of balance never lingers long. You drift deeper into the Cambrian waters, and suddenly the city feels louder, sharper, more restless. Stability has given creatures a foothold, but it has also raised the stakes. Every predator is learning, every prey is countering, and the arms race ratchets up again with a new wave of invention. The first thing you notice is speed. Trilobites that once ambled across the seafloor now scuttle with surprising quickness, legs pumping in synchronized bursts. Some even roll into tight balls, spiny, armored pillbugs of the ancient sea, turning defense into a strategy. You can almost hear them mutter, "Catch me if you can," but predators respond in kind. Anomalocaris, already a terror, grows faster, more agile. Its great stalked eyes track not just motion, but trajectories. It doesn't just see you, it predicts you. You watch one coil its body, then snap forward with astonishing grace, grabbing a wriggling trilobite in its clawed appendages. The bite crushes through armor with a sickening crack. The ocean ripples with the reminder. Innovation buys time, but never safety. Nearby, a new kind of experiment takes shape. Creatures grow spines, not just short bumps, but extravagant spikes jutting from their bodies like living barbed wire. Hallucigenia is the strangest of them all, tottering forward on absurd stilt legs, its back bristling with spears. At first glance, it looks ridiculous, like something doodled during a boring lecture. But in a world where jaws are getting stronger, absurdity can mean survival. Predators think twice before biting down on a walking pincushion. Not all strategies are violent. Some creatures slip into stealth. Soft-bodied worms flatten themselves against the seafloor, blending with sediment until they vanish from sight. Others develop burrows so intricate they resemble underground fortresses, labyrinths with multiple exits, designed not just to hide, but to confuse pursuers. You trail a finger along one collapsed tunnel, marveling at its clever geometry. Even without eyes or maps, these creatures are drawing blueprints in mud. And then there are the innovators of disguise. Some trilobites carry uneven ridges across their shells, breaking up their outline like natural camouflage. To your eyes, they still look obvious, but to a predator scanning the seabed in murky light, they dissolve into background. It's the first whisper of a tactic that will one day paint zebras, owls, and cuttlefish. The escalation doesn't stop there. Nervous systems sharpen reflexes. Muscles coordinate in tighter synchrony. Creatures are not just fleeing, they are maneuvering. You watch two trilobites dart in opposite directions when startled, a strategy to confuse attackers. One becomes lunch, the other slips away. A grim lottery, but it works often enough to persist. Even stranger, cooperation begins to surface. Small filter feeders cluster together in loose groups, their combined swaying bodies creating currents that funnel food toward them. Safety in numbers is not just a human cliché, it is an ancient truth. Predators, after all, struggle to target a single body in a crowd. Historians still debate which innovations mattered most in this arms race. Was it speed, armor, spines, camouflage? The truth is untidy, as always. What you see is not a single ladder of progress, but a branching arms bazaar. Every lineage experimenting, some succeeding, most vanishing. The Cambrian is evolution's equivalent of an open mic night. Messy, chaotic, brilliant, and occasionally absurd. One odd fact that makes you chuckle. Trilobites sometimes molted their shells mid-battle. Imagine fighting off a predator, only to shrug out of your armor like a superhero doing a dramatic costume change, leaving the predator with nothing but an empty husk. Whether intentional or accident, it worked often enough to leave piles of abandoned exoskeletons across the seafloor. The water around you pulses with this relentless one-upmanship. It is no longer a city, it is an arms factory buzzing with upgrades. No creature can rest. Every innovation demands a counter. Every counter sparks another innovation. The Cambrian Explosion is not just about life diversifying. It is about life competing endlessly. And as you watch, a strange realization sinks in. This dynamic will never end. The trilobite spines, the Anomalocaris eyes, the worm burrows, they are the first verses of a song still being sung in every forest, every savanna, every coral reef. Hawks and mice, cheetahs and gazelles, even your own ancestors with spears, all are echoes of this first arms race under ancient seas. The current pulls you onward, and you glance back at the battlefield. Spines glitter, shells crack, predators lunge, prey scatter. It is harsh, unforgiving, yet undeniably magnificent. From struggle comes creativity, and from creativity comes resilience. The Cambrian seas are teaching the oldest lesson of all. Survival is never static. It is a game that never ends. The ocean tilts darker as you drift into deeper waters, and here the stakes feel heavier. The Cambrian city of grazers, burrowers, and spined oddities has found its rhythm. But looming above them all are the giants, the apex predators who redefine fear. This is the era when size itself becomes a weapon, and dominance takes on a new, terrifying shape. You see it before you feel it. A shadow gliding across the seafloor, wide as a dinner table, long as a human arm. Then, with a flick of its body, it tilts, revealing stalked eyes and grasping appendages. Anomalocaris. The name will be coined hundreds of millions of years later, but here and now, it needs no introduction. It is the ocean's tyrant, the first monster of the deep. Its body undulates with an alien grace, flexible yet powerful. Two great arms reach forward, ringed with spines, snapping shut with brutal precision. At the center, a circular mouth, lined with overlapping plates, grinds prey like a living garbage disposal. You wince at the sight, but also marvel. This is what happens when the arms race hits steroids. Evolution has created a predator so advanced, it seems centuries ahead of its time. Around it, trilobites scatter in panic. Some roll into armored balls, others dart into burrows, but many are caught mid-scurrying. One trilobite, unlucky but defiant, curls tight, hoping its shell holds. The predator clamps down, and for a moment you think the armor might resist. Then comes the slow crunch, a soundless shattering, as Anomalocaris devours its prize. The ocean is no longer safe, and it isn't alone. Other giants prowl, strange arthropods with spiny claws, eel-like swimmers with jawless mouths, each pushing size to new limits. For millions of years, the average creature was no bigger than your fingernail. Now, suddenly, you float among bodies as long as your arm, with appetites to match. Growth itself has become strategy. Why size? Because in this world, bigger often means faster, stronger, more intimidating. A giant predator can cover more ground, grab more prey, dominate more territory. But size carries costs too. More food, more energy, more risk if prey populations dip. You smile, realizing the first giants are also the first energy addicts. Forever hungry, forever hunting. The prey respond with their own innovations. Trilobites deepen their burrows, digging not just holes but multi-chambered bunkers. Some creatures flatten their bodies to slip beneath the sand, turning invisibility into a survival tactic. Others grow elaborate spines so long that even if they're caught, swallowing becomes a nightmare. You picture Anomalocaris gagging on a spiny worm and can't help but laugh. Even monsters have bad meals. Historians still debate whether Anomalocaris truly ruled uncontested. Some argue its mouthparts weren't strong enough to crush trilobite shells, that it targeted softer prey instead. Others insist fossilized bite marks on trilobites prove otherwise. The truth may be both. A predator experimenting, shifting diets depending on what worked. After all, dominance doesn't mean perfection, it means persistence. And Anomalocaris persists. For tens of millions of years, it will haunt these seas, outlasting many competitors, shaping prey strategies in every direction. Its very existence forces innovation. Without it, would trilobites have grown tougher shells? Would burrows have become fortresses? Would camouflage have sharpened? Apex predators don't just eat. They sculpt entire ecosystems. One strange fact you might not know. Anomalocaris had eyes with as many as 16,000 lenses. Compound vision so sharp, it would shame most modern insects. Imagine walking into a room and instantly noticing every flicker of motion, every twitch, every shadow. It saw the Cambrian world in dizzying mosaics of clarity, a hunter with a surveillance system wired into its head. You suddenly feel very small, very seen. As you hover in the current, the scene takes on a cinematic quality. The grazers scrape, the burrowers dig, the scavengers nibble, all under the constant threat of the giant drifting above. This is no longer just survival. It is theater, predator, and prey locked in an endless performance. And in this performance, the star is size. You can't help but think forward. Later ages will bring even larger monsters, sharks, reptiles, whales. But Anomalocaris is the prototype, the Cambrian's proof of concept for apex dominance. It is both terrifying and oddly elegant, reminding you that the role of giant hunter has always been part of the script. The water around you shivers as another shadow passes. A second Anomalocaris glides by, And for a moment, the two cross paths. There is no battle, just mutual acknowledgement, titans cruising their domain. The smaller creatures pause in their feeding, as though holding their breath until the shadows move on. You drift upward, leaving the giants below, but the unease lingers. The Cambrian seas have reached a new stage. This is no longer just an arms race of tiny inventions. It is now an ecosystem with kings, and every kingdom demands tribute. The Cambrian seas feel eternal, don't they? A bustling alien metropolis of shells and spines, burrows and hunters. But here's the cruel joke of Earth's history. Nothing lasts forever. Survival is not a guarantee, not even for the apex monsters with compound eyes and dinner plate mouths. Inevitably, the stage lights dim and entire casts are forced to exit. Extinction. It doesn't whisper. It crashes. You might expect some world-ending asteroid, a Hollywood fireball blotting out the sun. Not this time. The Cambrian ends with something quieter, but just as deadly. Shifting oceans. Currents stall, oxygen thins, nutrients dwindle. The chemistry of survival tilts ever so slightly, and that's all it takes. Creatures who once thrived suddenly find themselves gasping, starving, fading. At first, you barely notice. A trilobite population dips here, a cluster of filter feeders dwindles there. But then, entire reefs collapse. Burrows lie abandoned, their builders gone. The scavengers grow frantic, picking through emptier and emptier hunting grounds. It's like watching a marketplace slowly empty until only silence remains. And the predators? Imagine Anomalocaris patrolling its range, eyes sharp as ever, but the sea below looks barren. No trilobites to snatch, no worms to crunch. Its graceful arms sweep through nothing but sand, the first giant of the deep, starving in its own kingdom. There's a tragedy in that. Monsters are mighty only as long as their food supply keeps pace. Of course, extinction isn't fair. Some lineages vanish entirely, leaving no descendants, no second chance. Others squeak through, not because they're superior, but because luck tosses them a bone. Maybe they burrowed just deep enough to outlast low oxygen. Maybe their larvae drifted into pockets where currents still carried food. Maybe they were simply too small and obscure for disaster to notice. You see survivors clinging on. Certain trilobites endure, hardened and resourceful. Worms keep wriggling, absurdly persistent. Tiny shelled creatures continue filtering what little remains in the water. They don't know it, but they are the ancestors of things to come. Their persistence is the thread that will carry life forward. And yet, the Cambrian's giants, the flagships of innovation, the showpieces of the arms race, most of them will vanish. Anomalocaris, gone. Countless spiny grazers, gone. This is the paradox of evolution. The dazzling experiments that define an era rarely last beyond it. Innovation burns bright, but rarely burns long. You lean back in the currents, struck by the rhythm of it. The Cambrian wasn't just a beginning. It was also a warning. Life explodes, diversifies, dazzles, and then it collapses. Over and over, this cycle will repeat across the ages. Bursts of creativity followed by pruning, as though Earth insists on editing its own story. Think about it. If every experiment had lasted, the ocean around you would be a cluttered warehouse of every weird shape evolution ever dreamed up. Instead, extinction clears the shelves again and again, forcing new players to rise. Painful, yes. Wasteful, perhaps. But it also ensures that life never stagnates. Some scientists argue these Cambrian extinctions weren't singular catastrophes, but rolling waves, smaller collapses stacked over millions of years. A slow grinding down, not a single hammer blow. You prefer that image. Less apocalyptic, more like a series of tides washing over the reef, erasing some designs, leaving others half buried, waiting for discovery. And you, floating in this fading sea, feel the poignancy of it. The Cambrian was a theater of invention, but the curtain falls. Whole lineages disappear without fanfare. Their fossilized remains the only whispers left for paleontologists to piece together eons later. Imagine all the colors, behaviors, and strategies lost forever, never even glimpsed by human eyes. Still, this isn't the end of life, it's a reset. A pause before the next great act. The oceans will refill, the survivors will adapt, and the arms race will resume with new players, new rules. Extinction isn't just an end, it's the space evolution needs to write a new script. You can't help but wonder, if you were a Cambrian creature, which would you prefer, to shine brilliantly for a short while, or to endure quietly, unnoticed, and leave a legacy? It's not an easy choice. The ocean offers no answers, only silence, broken by the faint shimmer of survivors drifting in the gloom. The Cambrian is closing, but the story of life is far from over. The Cambrian's great curtain call leaves a hush, doesn't it? The water feels thinner now, emptier, as though someone scooped half the life out of the sea and forgot to put it back. But you wait, because history doesn't stop. The survivors are still here, quietly clinging on, and from their stubborn persistence, the next age of innovation will bloom. Imagine those burrows again, where once they were bustling crossroads of predators and prey, now only a handful of small worms remain, pushing through sediment like janitors cleaning up after a grand party. It seems pitiful at first, yet in their persistence lies power. They cycle nutrients, oxygenate the mud, and prepare the ground, literally, for whatever comes next. These unassuming little creatures are not just survivors. They are the caretakers of continuity. Trilobites shuffle forward too, scarred but alive. Some species shrank during the hardship, reducing energy needs. Others develop tougher shells, as if determined never to be easy prey again. You watch them scurry across the seafloor, no longer the carefree wanderers of earlier days, but gritty veterans. It's like watching an old rock band play small clubs after their stadium days, diminished, but still keeping the beat. And in the reefs, those fragile cathedrals of calcium, life begins to knit itself back together. Tiny corals, early relatives of sponges, and even primitive algae re-establish footholds. They don't restore the full splendor immediately. Recovery is cautious, measured. But slowly, patch by patch, the ocean floor regains texture. Think of it as evolution rolling up its sleeves after a disaster, patching leaks and repainting the walls. The truth is, extinction isn't only about loss. It's also a release of opportunity. When dominant creatures vanish, their empty niches become invitations. New players, descendants of the overlooked and the lucky, step forward to claim the abandoned jobs. Suddenly, a worm that was once background noise might become the ancestor of an empire of predators. A shrimp-sized filter feeder might, millions of years later, give rise to crustaceans that rule global fisheries. You drift beside a cluster of survivors and realize how fragile yet resilient life is. It doesn't need grandeur to endure, it just needs persistence. And in persistence, it finds freedom. Freed from the shadow of the Cambrian's giants, the ocean is ready to rewrite itself again. Some paleontologists believe this rebound set the stage for entirely new ecosystems, food chains more stable, more interconnected, better able to weather future storms. It's as if extinction taught life a hard lesson. Don't put all your eggs in one evolutionary basket. Spread out, diversify, hedge your bets. You might not look flashy, but you'll survive when the glamorous creatures vanish. There's a strange comfort in that, isn't there? The ocean isn't a straight climb toward perfection. It's a rhythm. Burst, collapse, rebound, like breathing, like waves lapping endlessly at the shore. And here you are, caught in that breath, watching as the survivors knit the torn fabric of the biosphere into something new. You reach out, brushing your fingers through the water, and almost imagine you can feel the pulse of time itself. These small, half-forgotten survivors don't know what futures they hold, but you do. They are the bridge to the Ordovician, to coral reefs that will rival skyscrapers, to fish with jaws sharp enough to shape empires, to ancestors that, against all odds, will one day walk on land. For now, though, the ocean remains subdued. The brilliance of the Cambrian has dimmed, replaced by quieter resilience. The monsters are gone, but the story goes on. And you, drifting here, are left with a paradoxical sense of peace. In endings lie beginnings. In survival lies promise. You wonder if, millennia from now, when some distant species looks back at humanity's own rise and fall, they will see the same rhythm, the survivors carrying the torch forward, stitching together the world again. The thought is oddly comforting. The Cambrian has ended, but the future waits, patient, in the smallest beating heart still hidden beneath these waves. The ocean takes a long, deep breath. The silence of the post-Cambrian fade begins to swell into something richer. You drift through time, letting millions of years roll past you like waves on an endless shore. Slowly, the waters brighten again. Oxygen levels rise, nutrients flow more steadily, and the survivors of extinction find themselves standing on the threshold of a new chapter. Welcome to the Ordovician seas, a world at once familiar and utterly transformed. At first glance, you might think you've stumbled into a coral cathedral. Reefs return, but this time they're bigger, bolder, more complex. Imagine walking into a brand new city after the ruins of an old one have been swept away. The foundations are sturdier, the streets busier, and the skyline more ambitious. That's what these reefs feel like. Vast fortresses built from the skeletons of bryozoans, corals, and algae. Entire ecosystems bloom within their walls, turning the seafloor into a labyrinth of hiding places, feeding grounds, and battle arenas. Trilobites march on, still stalwart survivors. But now they share the seas with newcomers that seem to have arrived from an evolutionary design contest. Nautiloids, the ancestors of squids, stretch long conical shells, some growing over 10 feet in length. Picture a sleek missile gliding silently through the depths, except this one has tentacles dangling from the front. They are the new apex predators, scanning the reefs with unblinking eyes, testing every crevice for prey. Where Anomalocaris once ruled, the nautiloids now claim dominion. And the prey? Oh, the menu has expanded. Armored brachiopods scatter across the seabed like ceramic bowls, each clamped shut against intruding claws. Echinoderms, ancestors of starfish and sea lilies, sprout like living chandeliers from the floor, filtering plankton with delicate arms. Even the worms diversify, evolving extravagant feeding appendages and bizarre body plans. It's as if evolution, still giddy from the Cambrian's chaos, has decided to take another shot at weirdness, but this time with more restraint and structure. The water hums with life. Swarms of plankton drift in sunlit layers, feeding shoals of tiny filter feeders. You watch them flash like sparks in the current, and it reminds you of neon signs flickering to life in a city night. The ocean feels alive in a way that even the Cambrian didn't manage. Not just a burst of innovation, but a carefully tuned orchestra, with instruments playing in harmony rather than chaos. Of course, not everyone agrees on the details. Some historians of the Earth argue that the Ordovician wasn't so much a new age as a continuation of Cambrian trends. Others insist it was a radical leap forward, a whole new act in the drama of life. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in between. You smile at the thought. Scientists still bicker about events 500 million years gone, while you're here, floating among the very creatures they argue over. And there's a certain humor in it, too. Remember the Cambrian's weird one-offs, those creatures that looked like they were designed during an all-night brainstorming session? Many are gone, their experiments archived. Now the seas feel more polished, like the beta test is over, and evolution has moved on to the full-release version. Sure, there are still oddities, jawless fish starting to slither about, early cousins of vertebrates, but the vibe is more stable society than chaotic rave. You hover by a reef wall, feeling the vibration of hundreds of tiny mouths opening and closing, siphoning plankton. It's soothing, almost hypnotic. You think about how many millions of years it took to rebuild this community from the rubble of extinction. Time is patient, far more patient than any human deadline. In the grand scheme, recovery doesn't just happen. It's sculpted, slowly, carefully, grain by grain of sand. And still, predators circle. A nautiloid drifts past, tentacles unfurling like ribbons. It tests the water, hunting for any careless trilobite. You hold your breath instinctively, as though it might turn and notice you. But, of course, it doesn't. It slides past, a silent torpedo, vanishing into the reef shadows. Here in the Ordovician, the stage is set for yet another escalation. Bigger predators, sturdier defenses, deeper ecosystems. You can feel the tension already, the anticipation of the next act in this endless arms race. The Cambrian may have dazzled you with its first explosion of creativity, but the Ordovician? It's quieter, steadier, more profound. A rebuilding, a strengthening, a promise whispered through the currents. Life will not just survive, it will thrive, and in ways even stranger than before. The Ordovician seas don't stay calm for long. You can almost feel the tension building, like a stage where the props are set, the actors are in position, and the spotlight is about to flare again. The reefs are bustling now, every crack and ledge crammed with life, and you get the sense that the oceans have finally found their stride. But equilibrium is never permanent in Earth's history. Evolution doesn't like to sit still. You drift above the reef crest, and there it is, the escalation. Predators are not content to simply patrol, they innovate. Nautiloids, once sleek hunters of modest size, grow even larger. Some stretch over 4 meters long, living submarines prowling through shoals of trilobites. Their shells glint in faint sunlight, spiraled or straight, each design a different experiment in hydrodynamics. Tentacles writhe with unsettling precision, and those circular mouths work like living drills. Imagine a submarine crossed with a can opener, and you're not far off. Trilobites, of course, refuse to be easy snacks. They huddle in groups, develop spines, even perfect a trick you'd recognize from modern pill bugs, rolling up into armored balls. You picture one curling tightly just as a nautiloid latches on, the predator grinding uselessly against a spherical tank. A victory for the underdogs, if only temporarily, because predators always adapt, maybe with sharper beaks, maybe with more patience. The arms race continues. Elsewhere, echinoderms take on astonishing forms. Some anchor themselves like living flowers, filtering plankton with feathery arms. Others crawl with jointed plates, armored like medieval foot soldiers. You brush your hand against one and realize how rigid its body feels, like touching a star carved from stone. Evolution is clearly trying out castle defense mode, building fortresses out of flesh. And then come the vertebrates, or at least their faint beginnings. Jawless fish, lamprey-like shadows, glide awkwardly through the water. They're small, unimpressive, almost laughable beside the nautiloid titans. But you know better. These humble swimmers are the spark of a lineage that will one day give rise to sharks, dinosaurs, and eventually the restless primates who invent Wi-Fi. For now, though, they are little more than slippery whispers. The reefs themselves are no longer just background scenery. They're battlegrounds, fortresses, nurseries. Algae mat the surfaces in thick green drapes, feeding armies of grazers. Filter feeders extend delicate fans, pulling in microscopic banquets. Predators lurk in corridors of coral, launching ambushes with ruthless efficiency. You swim through it all and can't help thinking, This is less like a random scattering of creatures and more like a fully functioning city. Streets, markets, gangs, guardians, it's all here, pulsing with purpose. And the funny thing, even in this ancient metropolis, life still has its quirks. One trilobite species develops compound eyes with thousands of tiny lenses, better than any surveillance system. Another evolves bizarre spines so extravagant they look like punk rock hairdos. You catch yourself smirking. Nature has always had a sense of humor, hasn't it? Even 470 million years ago, someone out there was wearing their rebellion on their shell. Of course, the balance is fragile. These ecosystems feel solid, but they rest on the knife edge of climate and chemistry. Oxygen currents falter, populations crash, seas warm or cool a little too much, reefs bleach, niches collapse. The Ordovician world is thriving, yes, but it is also learning the price of its complexity. And you, drifting silently through this thriving sea, feel the pulse of inevitability. The arms race will never end. For every fortress, a siege engine. For every defense, a sharper offense. For every triumph, a downfall waiting in the wings. The ocean doesn't care about fairness. It only cares about change. Still, in this moment, you can almost relax. The Ordovician seas glow with abundance, creatures flourishing in numbers that would astonish their Cambrian ancestors. Life has not just survived the pruning, it has come back louder, stronger, more elaborate. The page is turning, and you're here to witness it, one ripple at a time. The Ordovician seas have swelled into something vast and confident. What began as patchwork reefs has now grown into sprawling fortresses, super reefs stretching for miles, stacking layer upon layer of life. You glide over one and realize the scale. Towering walls of coral-like organisms, ridges of bryozoans, arches where currents funnel schools of tiny swimmers. It feels less like drifting through a reef and more like soaring over an alien metropolis built entirely out of bone and shell. Every niche is filled. Trilobites still scuttle across the sandy avenues, armored veterans of a bygone age. Brachiopods carpet the seafloor in uncountable numbers, shells gaping and closing like a synchronized dance. Above them, sea lilies sway like chandeliers in the current, waving their feathery arms to sieve plankton from the water. And threading through it all, nautiloids, those long-shelled titans, patrolling like the heavy artillery of this new age. This is expansion on a planetary scale, no longer confined to shallow coastal waters. Ecosystems stretch farther and deeper. Warm equatorial seas teem with life, reefs sprawling like emerald jungles. Even cooler waters at higher latitudes play host to thriving communities. For the first time in Earth's story, complex marine ecosystems don't just exist here and there. They dominate the oceans worldwide. You pause and let that sink in. 500 million years ago, the seas were a patchy experiment. Now, they are a global phenomenon. The blueprint of modern oceans, reefs, predators, food webs with many layers, has finally taken hold. In a sense, you're looking at the true birth of the marine biosphere we recognize today. Of course, not everything is peaceful. Expansion means competition, and competition means conflict. In reef crevices, trilobites duel with spiny worms over scraps of algae. In open water, nautiloids harry schools of jawless fish, scattering them like startled pigeons in a city square. Predation, defense, escape. It's an endless cycle, every creature pushed to sharpen its edge or risk fading away. And yet, despite the violence, the overall impression is one of abundance. The seas are crowded, noisy, alive. Even the plankton layer above, glittering in sunlight, is denser than ever before, a shimmering ceiling that feeds the world below. You can almost hear it, millions of tiny mouths opening and closing, a soft, static hum of survival. There's humor in it too. One trilobite species evolves absurdly long spines, sticking out like TV antennas, presumably to deter predators. You imagine one poor nautiloid getting a face full of spikes and retreating, nursing bruised tentacles. Another lineage develops elaborate compound eyes with lenses that curve in every direction, as though wearing wraparound sunglasses long before humans invented them. Fashion, it seems, is eternal. But beneath the bustle, a question lingers. Expansion on this scale is glorious, but is it sustainable? Complex systems, after all, are fragile. One shift in climate, one disruption in currents, and the web could unravel. You've seen this rhythm before: boom, bust, recovery. And here, floating above a reef that looks invincible, you can't help but sense the inevitability of another test. Scientists today still debate the exact timing and triggers of the Ordovician boom. Was it tied to higher oxygen levels? To continental drift creating more shallow seas? To the rise of plankton pumping nutrients through the system? Probably all of the above. The truth is, Earth rarely gives a single reason for anything. It prefers messy stories, layers upon layers of cause and effect. For now, though, you allow yourself to be immersed in the spectacle. Super reefs stretch below you, teeming cities of shell and sinew. Predator and prey chase each other through coral canyons. The water thrums with energy, every current carrying the promise of survival, or the threat of demise. You smile because you already know how fragile this brilliance is, but in this moment, it doesn't matter. The Ordovician seas are alive, louder and grander than anything that came before. The world is humming its song of abundance, and you're floating right in the middle of the chorus. The Ordovician seas seem unstoppable. From pole to equator, reefs sprawl like shimmering fortresses. Predators stalk with confidence, and plankton rain down like an eternal feast. It feels like life has cracked the code. This is abundance perfected, ecosystems firing on all cylinders. But history, as you've learned, has a cruel sense of timing. The louder life sings, the harsher the silence when the song stops. The end begins quietly, a shift in the air, literally. Carbon dioxide levels drop, global temperatures tilt, and ice creeps across the continents. What was once a warm, teeming planet begins to cool. Glaciers spread, sea levels fall, and shallow marine habitats, the very foundation of these super reefs, shrink away. Imagine entire coastal cities drying out overnight, leaving their inhabitants gasping in stranded puddles. That's what happens here, except the cities are reefs and the citizens are brachiopods, trilobites, and nautiloids. At first it seems survivable. Some reefs endure, some trilobites scurry into deeper waters, but then the collapse accelerates. Ocean chemistry shifts, oxygen dwindles, nutrient cycles falter. Those dazzling global food webs, the ones that took tens of millions of years to build, unravel in mere millions. It's a slow-motion disaster, but by geological standards, it's a thunderclap. You drift above the ruins, watching once bustling reef avenues lie empty. Brachiopod shells pile up like broken pottery. Sea lilies collapse into heaps, their elegant arms limp in the current. The mighty nautiloids, apex predators of the Ordovician, patrol increasingly barren seas, growing gaunt, their dominance hollow. It's heartbreaking, like watching kings pace through abandoned palaces, searching for subjects that no longer exist. And the trilobites? Oh, they fight. They cling to the edges of survival with spines, eyes, and stubborn determination. Some burrow deeper, some shrink in size, others spread to desperate new habitats. But no amount of adaptation can save all of them. Lineage after lineage falls silent. The survivors will carry on, yes, but they will never again rule the seas with the confidence they once had. Scientists today still argue about the precise mechanics of the Ordovician extinction. Was it glaciation alone? Fluctuations in sea level? or sudden warming after the ice retreated. A 1-2 punch that caught ecosystems off guard. The debates continue, but the outcome is certain. Nearly 85% of marine species vanish. 85%. That's not just pruning, it's clear-cutting an entire forest of possibility. You hover in the gloom, the ocean around you eerily quiet. For the first time since the Cambrian spark, it feels like the seas themselves are holding their breath. The symphony of abundance has stopped mid-note, leaving only silence echoing in your ears. And yet, in that silence, you recognize the rhythm again. This isn't the first collapse you've seen. It won't be the last. Life burns bright, then falters, then reshapes itself. The Cambrian taught you that. The Ordovician confirms it. The cycle of boom and bust is not an accident. It's the heartbeat of evolution. Still, you can't help but mourn. Think of the colors lost, the shapes erased, the countless experiments of evolution gone forever. Imagine all the trilobite variations you'll never see, the nautiloid designs that never made it past this bottleneck. It's a sobering reminder. History doesn't keep everything. It's ruthless in its editing. But even here, amid extinction, there's a whisper of persistence. Some trilobites endure. Some fish-like forms survive, carrying vertebrate hopes into the ages ahead. Tiny plankton weather the storm, seeds of tomorrow's abundance. The silence is not the end of the story. It's the pause before the next great eruption of creativity. You close your eyes against the dimming currents, letting the hush settle over you. The Ordovician has fallen, but life remains. And in that persistence, the stage is already being set for the next act. One you will follow step by step, as the Earth keeps turning its pages.